Today we want to talk about migrant and migration. So greetings and welcome back to the channel. If for the first time you're coming across my channel, please remember to subscribe. And a disclaimer, anything you hear on this channel is not to be taken personally. What I'm doing here, informational purpose only. Thank you. So, that said, today we want to talk about migrant and migration. We will come back again and talk about different communities, migrant and migration, and how those communities benefit the UK. So we're gonna start with a clip. Actually, we start with let's play this small clip, and then we will play the main clip. Okay.
The worst part of the boat. About 100 migrants are piled on top of each other. There is an unbearable stench and the heat is suffocating. There is no breeze at all. The deafening sound of the engine is headache-inducing.
It's really awful here, honestly. I can't even breathe properly. I'm really uncomfortable. It's so hot. There's vomit everywhere. People got seasick and had to throw up. And the smell spreads around. I'm so uncomfortable. But I don't have a choice.
So now, migrant and migration. As you can see there, the trip that these migrants take to come across the seas is not a very easy thing to do, and life is at risk. And for someone to take the journey or make the journey, it should show that they're in a desperate situation. Now, who is to be blamed? Number one, you could blame their own government. That could be blamed. But also, I believe blame could be placed on the UK, the Americas, which is USA, because the America is big, as I mentioned before, South and North, and Central, and France and other European countries that make it their duty to go into these places and either remove their government or destabilize the whole place. Take one of the main places they're coming from, like a country like Libya. Once they remove Gaddafi, and it's still in a state of chaos. So I'm also gonna mention slavery. You see, some of us here in the UK, this place that is rioting and don't want some people to stay here. It's amazing how some people have short memory. Because according to the video I'm gonna play next, we was invited here after being first enslaved, then colonized, and now neo-colonized. So our presence here in this region is not by choice. If we was allowed to stay where we was according to Marcus Garvey, we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be our first choice. Also, if these present day governments, and they are very corrupt, would allow the foreign governments to, or overseas governments to, run their country in a way where it is suitable according to the demographic of the country, then you would find that the situation wouldn't be so dire. Because it's not just happening coming across the Mediterranean. If you look back and a video I've done before, it is happening in the Americas, because America, which is the United States, have destabilized a lot of those neighboring countries, including the Caribbean. So, or the place they call the Caribbean. So when people now going across the border and going to their countries, they shouldn't be harassed, because it's deliberate that your government destabilize other part of the world. So this is the consequence. In the word that Malcolm X is basically the chicken coming home to roost. So immigrant and immigration. Immigrants and immigration in the UK, according to the rioters, is why they're rioting. But I believe they should check their history and see that these immigrants and these people that is coming across the borders is not doing so by free will. These countries where these immigrants are coming from are being destabilized and neo-colonized. So therefore the governments that is running these countries do not have the power and the resources to provide for the majority of the public. Also, some of these governments are deeply corrupt. So, and those that try to come away from the Western ways and help their people have been persecuted and in some cases eliminated. So take for instance Libya, where most of these what people call migrants are coming across on small boats. Libya is one of those places that was very well off and was very secure in the time of Gaddafi. And once they went and create havoc and remove the president, Gaddafi, and he was killed a very brutal way, where I see some things they ban from YouTube that shouldn't be shown, including some of my videos. I have video that is taken down from my channel because it said it breached certain community guidelines, which is, I was talking about the C word, how people could use herbs to help themselves, and they removed the video. And I see they have this video of the murder of Gaddafi on YouTube for people to see. They probably take it down now, but it was there. I saw it. So it just shows you the scope of the corruption and favoritism, and you know, who is allowed to do certain things and who is not allowed. It is I will have to talk about these things. So this is not going to be the last video on this topic here, because I believe the Pandora box, so to speak, have been opened. And we know who wanted to speak from a long time and didn't have what I call the courage, or you know, to speak. But now we don't have a choice, because these guys are burning and looting and rioting and vandalizing. So and life is at risk. So therefore one have to speak, and that's why I mentioned before that people shouldn't be offended also, because this is for informational purposes, and anything that is here and you don't believe it, you can also go to YouTube or go to Google to verify. As well as I will try my best to put the videos, the clips I have, I will try to put the long video into the description box so that you can go and view the full length video. Now, I want to come back in the next video and speak about the India and Pakistani community and the contribution to the UK in terms of economical contribution and medical contribution and technological contribution. People that was colonized have contributed to this society enormously, and the unfairness in the action of these minority people, because even though we're in the UK and they call us minority, but globally, this is just one part of the planet, the small area actually. Globally, we are majority, not minority. So when people using the word minority, it's actually been used out of context, in my opinion. And if I am wrong, then prove me wrong. Check and see how much people like this on the planet, and check and see how much people like that. I try my best not to be biased and try my best not to speculate. I try my best. That's why sometimes the video take a week to come up, because I try my best to not jump on the bandwagon and what is trending, but to do my own research so that when I speak, I know what I'm speaking about. It's been a while since I have these information in my head and things to speak about, but I promise I wasn't gonna be internalizing anything but external slides, because I've been having issues in terms of rebuilding my confidence in speaking to the camera. So I had to try and find place where it's isolated and things like that. But I think I'm slowly coming back. Give me a thumbs up if you think I'm slowly coming back. And please remember to subscribe, because the subscription is also free and it helps the channel to grow. Another thing I want to talk about, when you count immigration and how people are persecuting people that is immigrating or migrating, I would also ask to point out some very blatant bias that I've seen in the war in Ukraine. This is tribal war. People that is relative are fighting. And the immigration and migration from Ukraine, it is not being talked about. No one mentioned it. Why? Because the people that is immigrating and migrating from Ukraine is looking different. So therefore, it's more, it's more welcoming, because the people look like each other, so to speak. But those people did not contribute. Those people did not contribute in building this so-called rich empire. So therefore, those who contribute the most into building should be rewarded the most. That is what you call fairness. And it's sometimes expected, but therefore not to be expected. Because these people, some of these people, because I don't want to put everyone in the same boat or under the same umbrella. Some of these people is not fair and very biased and very judgmental. And as I said before, they also need to take a deep look in the mirror. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a great day.
The flow began after the war.
They came to work in British hospitals and on the buses. Indeed, the Post-War Nationality Act, in theory, entitled 800 million people across the empire, a quarter of the world's population, to come here. Tens of thousands did so, often invited. So, in 1962, Macmillan's Conservatives set new rules for Commonwealth immigrants.
Rule 1. The immigrant must have a job to come to.
But this ITN film from a street in Smethwick showed the growing tension.
It's here that the whites have banded together and look as though they'll persuade the Conservative-controlled council to halt the coloured invasion. Up to 6 years ago, Marshall Street was all white, like the ads say, shining white. Then, in 1958, a Jamaican, Mr. St. Aubyn Henry, moved in at number 85. In 1960, the old lady at number 37 across the road died.
Houses owned by whites were bought by blacks and Asians.
And always it's coloured people who move in, whites who move out.
Things that we've seen them do in the streets as regards of emptying the chambers in the gutter. They used to put the children on the pavement to do the business.
The white people in this street say that the West Indians are unsanitary in their habits. True? That's a lie.
As whites marched against immigration, Enoch Powell delivered his rivers of blood speech.
We must be mad. Literally mad.
The Wilson Labour government imposed tougher curbs against Kenyan Asians, despite protests.
It has always been known that British government is fair and just. It appears at the moment that all the fairness and justice which they have always promoted has completely vanished.
When Idi Amin threw the Asians out of Uganda, the Tory Heath government took in 30,000 to Britain. But for 3 decades after that, immigration wasn't really a big political issue, till the numbers shot up under New Labour.
If we take the 50,000 a year, the 15,000 a year in that 50-year post-war period, it comes out on average of 30,000 a year, all right? That then, under Tony Blair, becomes, within a decade, nearly 300,000 a year, nearly 10 times what the post-war average had been.
Farage's party seized on the issue, paving the road to Brexit.
Absolutely.
And it was a huge mistake for Labour to dismiss public concerns, says a man who advised 2 Labour PMs.
This not listening, which I think was quite understandable in the Labour Party in the 60s and 70s, but later was not. It was a serious political mistake by the Liberal leadership of the Labour Party.
This is a Labour mug from the 2015 election, which caused leader Ed Miliband huge grief with his party. Labour did talk tough for a while, making controls one of their 5 pledges. And as David Cameron tried to cut net migration to tens of thousands, Vince Cable threatened to quit the coalition over foreign students. Immigration's been an issue of tensions and contradictions, which mainstream politicians have often avoided. Maybe no more.
I graduated in 2008 and my batch was about 80 plus nurses, and I only know of about 4 persons who remain in Jamaica.
Jamaica's nurses have been targeted by recruiters from Britain to alleviate the shortage of NHS nurses, but it's perpetuating a crisis here. Last week the government announced a nursing partnership with Jamaica, but it will mean Britain's so-called hostile environment will need to end.
There is a significant opportunity that could be had that could be mutually beneficial, but it would depend on the UK adjusting their rules, adjusting their immigration laws, and providing the opportunity.
70 years on from the Windrush, and Britain is again leaning on its former colonies, who want a more reciprocal relationship post-Brexit, and believe Britain has forgotten their contribution.
Well, we have some nurses from Jamaica and the Caribbean in our audience tonight. Cheryl Gregory, let me come to you. I mean, when you think about what has happened, how do you feel about Britain going to recruit nurses in Jamaica today?
In fact, it seems as if we've made full circle to what happened in post-1948, where nurses were invited here to build the new NHS. My concern is when we recruit nurses from the Caribbean, quite often the recruitees will be the most skilled. Who are going to be looking after the patients in the Caribbean when they're depleted of the cream of the crop?
How about you? What do you think?
It might be a good thing for the nurses coming, but as I'm thinking about here, when they do come here, would they be part of the system? They will be possibly encouraged by coming because of the financial status, but would they be given, it would be a Jamaican passport?
Will they get a British passport? It's the question all over again, isn't it? Let me come to Shankia Stewart, because what we've been saying tonight is that this is not just about the Windrush generation. Now, Shankia, you are also, well, you're facing deportation right now.
Yes, I am. I've been in the UK since I was 12, and I came to join my dad, who was heavily depressed at the time while making the application. Home Office refused me on certain grounds. When I found out about my immigration around age 18 and started to find it, they didn't deem it, my dad's sickness, as what you call it now, a compassionate to grant me my stay here. I am now 28. And I'm still fighting it. About a couple of weeks ago...
Unable to go to university?
Unable to go to university.
Were you able to work?
Not properly or anything like that.
So you came here as a child?
Yes, I did.
You can't do anything?
I can't do anything. And I've lived here for most of my life. There's a rule in the Home Office, if you've been here half of your life, between 18 and 25, they will give you compassionate leave. Well, the caseworker told me I missed that by 11 months. 11 months. They rejected my application on 11 months. 11 months.
And you weren't able to go to your own mother's funeral?
No, my mum died last year. Sorry. In Jamaica. I'm sorry, oh my God. And I couldn't go because I just made another application of £2,000 odd. And I wasn't able to go to my mum's funeral because my application was in the Home Office, which they took 1 year to send back to me.
And now, when did you get the deportation letter?
About 2 weeks ago, and they gave me 14 days to appeal.
And your dad is still with us?
My dad is still with us.
But he lives here?
He lives here.
And they're sending you there?
Yeah, they said that my dad can visit me in Jamaica, and they're not taking his illness into consideration.
He won't come back. This is not covered by what Amber Rudd said
more of us
in the House of Commons, and there are more of them.
Sorry.
So, Jacob Rees-Mogg, do you think cases like this are as compassionate? Do they also deserve action?
They need humane treatment. You need in any system a degree of discretion so that obvious injustices can be avoided. And somebody who has lived in this country from the age of 12 to 28, 16 years out of 28 years, it seems to me obviously is a case where compassion should be exercised. And this is where political leadership ought to be given to the Home Office. We have to have an immigration system. We have to decide who can come and who can't. But cases like this one are just so unfair and sad and wrong, because if the Home Office had deported somebody after a year or something, that's different. But somebody who spent more than half their life in the country, doesn't that tell you that the Home Office hasn't managed...
And you're surprised again by that kind of story?
I'm less surprised by this kind of story. I think we've seen more of this, unfortunately. We have seen elderly ladies who've lived in the country for a very long time, grandmothers who suddenly are going to be deported, and this gets into the news. And it's where discretion is important, because we need a system that allows the humanity of individuals to be taken into account, is not just a bureaucratic tick-box system. And I think the problem with the Home Office is that is how it operates, and that's why you got into the Windrush problem, and the problem for other Commonwealth citizens, as I mentioned, the lady who came to see me was from Australia, because it doesn't take into account the discretion and the compassion of individuals.
Just briefly, David Lammy, if you will, go on.
I'm just slightly frustrated with this emphasis on the Home Office, as if it's some sort of huge power that has nothing to do with the government of the day. Just ask the people in this room about the fees alone. The general public have no idea of the thousands and thousands of pounds it costs to make these applications every year. There's no other area of public life, when you apply for a driving licence, that requires huge fees for poor people that's going on every single day in our country.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean,
it can't be solved because there are many other people beyond Caribbean people caught up in this nightmare who are part of a greater Commonwealth. There is still the whole business of how you repair the damage done to people's lives. How do you compensate for the huge emotional losses and travesties? And actually, in the end, this also leads to a much bigger discussion about a hostile environment in which you ask teachers, doctors, landlords to become the new border guards in our country and police people out of their own life. That's a bigger question that still has to be answered.
Do you accept any responsibility from a Labour perspective?
Yes. There's been a nasty race to the bottom. It's been about numbers. It's been about deportations. And I'm afraid my party has also played some role in that. I think it's got more acute since a hostile environment, but this is a long story. And let me just be clear, the link between this country and the Caribbean did not begin in 1948 with the Windrush. All of us here of Caribbean descent are in this country and have this relationship in this country because our descendants were removed from Africa, taken across the Atlantic and put in the Caribbean. So, and let's be absolutely clear, the wealth of this country was on the back of that labour. That is why it is such a scandal, frankly, that we now have to, and we were made British subjects, we were colonised and made British subjects. You cannot then, 70 years after you ask us to come and help rebuild the country, so once again our labour is used, and then send us back across the ocean. It is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable.
To migrant labourers, today's sermon is on the week's urgent news.
The Windrush generation, many have been treated as illegal immigrants under new policy.
In this congregation, there's anger over Britain's perceived disrespect towards a relationship with the Caribbean that only goes one way.
You took us from a country and brought us here, enslave us, work us out to nothing, give us nothing, we get no land, right? Become squatters, in the land that you brought us in.
Quite a sad situation.
British unfairness is the word from this minister of religion.
You've seen the situation in Ukraine, you've seen how the world is responding. Now let me show you how the world is covering this invasion. I'm talking about the media, especially Western channels. How are they covering Russia's invasion? With blatant racism. Let me say something at the outset. As journalists, we do not filter hardships and pain. We do not see caste, color or gender. And we have stuck by this principle. When the Taliban stormed Kabul, we stood with Afghans. When Ethiopia attacked its own people, we questioned them. When unarmed black teenagers were gunned down in the US, we joined the outrage. Today we are doing the same. We see the plight of the Ukrainian people and we have reported on their hardships. But what about the Western media? They too are reporting on the crisis, on the war, on the refugees. But they do not see hardships. They only see race, the color of your skin, the color of your hair. Let me show you exhibit number 1. This exchange happened on the BBC, the so-called Guardian of Unbiased Reportage. Listen to how their panel describes the refugees from Ukraine.
It's really emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed.
People with blue eyes and blonde hair. That is why the so-called expert on the BBC is emotional, not because the people are homeless, not because their country is being invaded, but because their hair is blonde. On social media, a lot of people are defending the BBC. They say it's a guest, not their anchor. Let me take you back to September last year. Another guest was speaking on the very same channel, South Asian expert Christine Fair. She called out Pakistan's links with the Taliban. Do you remember what the BBC presenter did? She shut her down. She said it was violating the channel's unbiased coverage. So exposing terror links is a violation. Blatant racism and white supremacy is fine. Gold standard indeed. Now for exhibit number 2, NBC News from the US. Listen to this.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar.
Very similar to us. How so? Because the Syrian refugees are Muslims, their skin is darker, their hair is not blonde. So Europe does not want them. And remember, this is not being said at some white supremacy cult. This is happening on live television. Exhibit number 3, CBS News, another American broadcaster. Their reporter is appalled by the war, not because there is death and destruction, but because it is happening in Europe.
Now, like Iraq or Afghanistan, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
So Iraq and Afghanistan are uncivilized countries. Their people are uncultured. Their regimes are irresponsible. So they deserve war. They deserve hundreds of bombs and years of occupation. What about Ukraine? According to CBS, no. Ukraine does not deserve war or hardships because Ukraine is civilized. Well, this is what systemic racism looks like. Do you remember the 2015 refugee crisis? Around 1.3 million people sought asylum in Europe. Most of them were from Syria, Afghanistan and Nigeria. Do you remember how the West reacted? They shut their borders, they herded the refugees like cattle, and they branded them as terrorists. Back then, Western reportage was quite different. Let me show you what the BBC did. They prepared 7 charts depicting the refugee crisis. Let's focus on chart number 5. Which European countries are most affected? Now remember, this war was in West Asia. The bombs were dropping on West Asia, but this was the BBC's big concern. Which European countries are most affected? Now just to be clear, we welcome what Europe is doing to host Ukrainian refugees. They deserve all the help. Our question is, why just Ukraine? Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. It is not part of NATO. So what explains this level of assistance? Racism. You see, Ukrainians are Europeans, hence they get the red carpet, but Africans and Asians get border crackdowns and refugee camps. Western media is part of the problem, I have to say. They reflect the public mentality, their sense of European supremacy. And the problem is, governments are not doing anything to help. In fact, they're adding fuel to this fire. Let me show you what Bulgaria's Prime Minister said about refugees. I'm quoting. These people are intelligent, they're educated people. This is not the refugee wave we have been used to. People we were not sure about their identity. People with unclear pasts who could have been even terrorists. That was a European head of state. He is openly calling West Asian refugees terrorists. If this does not expose Western hypocrisy, nothing does. They invaded Asian and African countries, they waged war, they committed war crimes, and when the people fled, they shut their borders. What does this tell you? That refugees were never the problem. That money or borders were not the issue. The issue was race. Think about it.
Here, too, we must have the courage to tell it like it is. Africa is not a poor continent. To the contrary, it is rich with strategic resources. It holds half of the world's minerals, including abundant rare earths, and 60% of arable lands that are often not utilized. Africa is not a poor continent, but it has been often, and still is, an exploited continent. Here, too, we must have the courage to tell it like it is. Africa is not a poor continent. To the contrary, it is rich with strategic resources. It holds half of the world's minerals, including abundant rare earths, and 60% of arable lands that are often not utilized. Africa is not a poor continent, but it has been often, and still is, an exploited continent.